From San Antonio, Texas, home of the Alamo, the Riverwalk, and the World Heritage San Antonio Missions, this is the Exit Planning Coach podcast with John F. Dini. Designed to help advisors who work with business owners, John talks with top professionals in the exit planning field about best practices, marketing tips, and how to be more effective when working with owners. Now, here's John F. Dini.
All right, welcome to today's edition of the Exit Planning Coach podcast. My guest today is James Maher. Jim is the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Archford Capital Strategies, a fascinating company. We're going to spend some time today talking about that structure and what he's done there, which I think is really terrific. Jim has more letters behind his name than I do. He's a JD, he's a CPA. He's in the bar. He's a certified financial planner. He's a certified exit planning associate. He's a certified retirement plan counselor and a couple more things that I don't know off the top of my head, and I only have the acronym here. His Archford is an RIA. He's also, besides the Missouri Bar, he's a member of the National Center for Employee Ownership. We were just offline talking about an ESOP he did. He's also a member of Vistage, and everybody who listens to this regularly knows what a fan I am of peer groups of all types. I was just running a peer group board this morning. I run 3 of those myself, Jim.
Okay.
He's been named Donor Advisor of the Year by Leave a Legacy, and he has 4 boys with his wife, Jenny. Welcome today, Jim. I've been looking forward for a long time to catching up with you.
That's awesome.
We've
Glad to be here, John.
Known you for 5 years or so, and it's been a blast. I'm going to ask you one general question that I start off every one of these podcasts with. You had a career. You were successful. What made you decide that exit planning was something that you wanted to focus on?
Great question. The fact that the demographics of my clients were moving in that direction. So I actually was in the second class of the Exit Planning Institute to do the CEPA back when I was at the University of Chicago, and it we work with about 600 closely held business owners. And as time was progressing, I was just recognizing that, hey, most of these guys have 80 to 90% guys and gals tied up in that business. And so looked at a lot of different designations. At that point, there was a lot of different professional designations involved with the organization. And so that seemed very attractive to me at that point. So it's 2000. I think that was 2011.
Wow, that is early, because I was just checking. I was listening to one of the EPI podcasts yesterday, and they were talking with a couple of guys, and they were talking about how early they were in the process. And he was 690 something, and he was in 2017. So yeah, you were well before that.
Yeah. We hadn't got to 100 yet.
Actually, I want to, from the normal questioning, I want to certainly go right to the St. Louis Regional Business Owner Study. I think that's a terrific thing you did. Not only for visibility, for marketing purposes, which certainly the advisors that listen to this will be interested in, but also for a much broader approach to raising awareness in the business owner community, which is always a big challenge for all of us. So can you tell us a little bit more about the study and how you set it up, and certainly what the results were?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was looking at a study that was done by KPMG, Pete Marwick, and it was a worldwide study on entrepreneurs, and a lot of great information, but I had a great association with the dean from the business school at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. They produce more entrepreneurs. Them and the University of Missouri St. Louis in our region, those 2 schools produce the most entrepreneurs. And I was talking to him. I said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could drop a pin in St. Louis and do a 150-mile radius of St. Louis. And let's see what's out there for companies that employ between 10 and 300 people. And he's like, private companies? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, we don't normally get that data. I know that I will be able to get a faculty member that would be very interested in this type of research and data gathering. And so we worked with Zoom, and as we put the statistics together, there's 32,000 companies that fit that profile in that area. We sent out over 5,000 surveys, got a 5% response rate. So if you've ever seen a little professor do backflips, this was a good example on that. As well. But she was elated with that sample size. And as we started to pull back the curtain on the information that was coming in, it was unbelievably dramatic. And it was, as advisors, you kind of have a gut feel for what's going on in a market or whatever. This was even more dramatic than what I thought. I mean, 2/3 of those companies were no longer growing. So you think about it, they missed peak cash, a peak transition for that company. 70% of those companies were more than 15 years old.
How does that compare to the rest of the world?
Yeah, great question. In the United States, typically you would see 25% of the companies being more than 15 years old. We were 70 here.
Wow.
And 40% of the 70%, those companies are in business more than 30 years. So you think about even the products and the things that they originally started using or doing, and how markets have moved and everything. But more importantly, John, and I'm like, there's a couple just projects that at this point in my career, I'm looking for impact. I'm going to go throw myself hard. One's on a professional sports league. I'm looking at data on young people and why the failures are there. And then on this one with businesses, on the data on this, 49% of all the employees in that 150-mile radius are employed by those companies. And so I think about, where does that leave us? If 2/3 of those companies, what's the growth opportunity for those employees? And part of my frustration, or part of my leaning into this, and I think we're not different than a lot of other places, there's a tremendous amount of money spent on startup companies. There's a tremendous amount of money spent on big box type companies, trying to get them into our market with tax incentives and everything like that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the bread and butter of our communities. These are the companies. Why are we not investing in a succession for these organizations? The retention of that 75 employees that were in a profitable company. So if we could show a path forward for those business owners and education, just awareness, I think that we become very good widget makers. And we're really good at it, and we don't, we're not checking our shoulder. We're not thinking about other things other than this widget. And this is something that I see looming for so many of these people. One of the other statistics that jumped out at me was 70% of these business owners were approaching at or past natural retirement age. So 63. So they're already there.
Yeah.
And so, but they haven't done anything with it. It was another one that is startling, is that 71% of them said planning was important, or 76% of them said planning was important. 91% of them said they thought about it. Only 26% of them had a written plan.
Yeah.
Kind of like my diet, John.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Those statistics then nationally, every time I see any kind of study like that, it's that, yes, it's important. Yes, it's real. Not today. It's always not today. I compare, I've often compared exit planning to, selling life insurance or funeral pre-planning,
Right.
Yeah, you're right. I should do that.
Important, but not urgent.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And when it's urgent, it's too late.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but I used to be a business broker at one time. And in addition to my coaching business, one of my coaches was a broker, and he fell prey to the temptation of all business brokers, which is he bought one of his listings. So grew that from $8 to $60 million. So he didn't do too badly. So many people, and that's what got me into exit planning. So many people will call you up and say, I really want to list my company for sale. And you go down there and they'd say, I'm ready. Who can you find me in 30 days?
Yeah, here's my keys.
Yeah. It's like, no, you're way too far down the road. Right. And the axiom in that business is when an owner tells you he's burned out, look at his financials. He burned out 3 years ago.
Right.
So as you said,
great point. That is a great point. And so many people, they don't think of that time. What they don't understand is they don't understand how it impacts the value of their company.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you want to walk away, you can, but this is what the market will pay you for that.
Yeah. Now you still work one-on-one with clients yourself, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Describe a first meeting with a new client, mid-market company, and they call up and you go out to see them. What do you focus on in your first meeting?
To definitely getting to know the individuals, and I've been doing this for a long time, and the people in my office, they go, oh, it's one of Jim's white papers, and I'll have a single white sheet of paper, so no preset questions, no preset agenda or whatever like that, and I always ask 5 questions to everyone. And the first question is their family tree. Very disarming. Everyone likes to talk about their family. You understand if there was, health issues with their parents, everything like that. The second thing that I talk about is, goals, objectives, concerns like that. Third thing, and I look down and I look at the paper and I start on assets, and I understand the titling of those assets. So then if they've done estate planning, how much is in the business versus other things, and what would happen if something happened. Fourth question's income, and the fifth question's who's their professionals. And I've been using that same methodology for almost 35 years, and I can have 2 to 4 hour type conversations, and they can tell me about fishing trips or whatever like that. And we'll always come back to those questions. And to me, I want to know who I'm going to work with at this point in my life. And for a long time, I mean, I always found that people that we worked with, if someone wasn't open to have that type of transparency with me, then I knew I wasn't ever going to be the lead advisor. I wasn't ever going to be kind of that head coach for what was going on behind the scenes. And it is a capacity issue, when you think about what you can do and who you want to work with. And I will leave those meetings, John, and I'll know more about them than some of their best friends. And that's an incredible experience. And they're not going to sit down and share that with every other professional advisor, how they frame them or how they look at them. So
and it's listening. listening is the key to that.
Right.
I just last month I published the Exit Planning Coach Handbook, and I don't think we've gotten you a copy yet, but you're on the list. And I start each with a quote, each chapter with a quote, which lots of people do, and one's from Dale Carnegie, and it says, "So simply by listening to what he had to say, he came to the conclusion that I was a great conversationalist."
And it's so true. I mean, how often are those individuals never in a position they really share their story? Everyone comes to their office and tells them how great their product is, their service, everything like that.
You don't become the most, and that's when we're doing the training on our ExitMap clients on how to debrief people. The first slide says you don't become the most trusted advisor by giving advice.
Right.
That's not what does it.
Right.
Let me take a break here so we can pay for the podcast, and we'll come back in just 60 seconds and finish up, because I really want to get into what you've done with Archford. I think that's fascinating. Hello, John F. Dini here, and I'm very excited to announce the publication of the Exit Planning Coach Handbook. Inspiration for the handbook comes from my 25 years of working as a coach to business owners, with 12 of those years dedicated to helping them plan their business transitions. It is a guide for advisors that explains why working with business owners is so dramatically different from working with other executives. It provides insights on how to approach planning conversations with owners more effectively. Plus, it takes you through the steps that will help you develop your relationship as their most trusted advisor. I wrote this book for advisors who want their clients to move on to a second act that's even more rewarding than their first. If you read any of my previous books, you know I don't lecture. It's a conversation between two professionals. If you work with business owners, I strongly encourage you to read the Exit Planning Coach Handbook. I think it will quickly become a go-to in your reference library. It is currently available on Amazon and the Kindle store in paperback and as an audiobook. Welcome back. I'm here with Jim Maher of Archford Capital Strategies in St. Louis, and we're having a great conversation. Jim, we are an advisor to advisor podcast, and we all know it takes a team. So and we will have all your contact information obviously listed with the podcast when we put it up. But in the meantime, for somebody who's listening, can you just give us your contact information, please, if they want to reach out to you?
Yes, it's J. Maher, Maher, at Archford, Archford Capital, Capital.com. And my phone number is 618-416-7081.
Thank you, sir. Now let's talk about Archford for a minute. I mean, before we got on, you were telling me what you had done with Archford. You started out as a financial planning firm. Were you always an RIA?
No, I actually was in the wirehouse before I launched Archford. So we're coming up on a decade with Archford. Had left the large wirehouse. Back in 2012, had about $250 million in lending that I was trying to get through, couldn't get it through. And so ended up on the outside looking in at a couple transactions that I had helped put together, and decided at that point that I did not want to be captive, and that we wanted to be able to help people buy products and services. And so we started with the RIA structure on the wealth management firm. I had 8 people with me at the time when we launched Archford. We've added, one of the first things we added was business consulting, our retirement plan services. We've purchased a couple accounting firms. We've purchased a wealth management firm, and continued to grow. In the past 9 years, we've made Inc. 5000 twice for fastest growing companies in the
congratulations.
And then we're the 26th fastest growing company in St. Louis. And so we're 68 today, over half are on our tax side. And, big focus on closely held businesses. We, as I mentioned earlier, work with about 600 closely held businesses, and they go in revenue up past $1 billion, and down to some mom pop, type shops. And so it's a love it. I was 5th generation farm boy, and so closely held businesses were definitely in my blood, and growing up, and grew up in the middle of the speaking of rising interest rates, in the middle of the early 80s, and the kind of the farm crisis, when I went to my Mizzou for my undergrad and law school, and just became fascinated with all the professional advisors that serve these different folks. And so for the first 25 years of my career, I went and got all the professional licenses and in certifications in those different areas to understand. I wanted to know what they knew, and to bring that back to a business and help them. And so we work in partnership with advisors, and we've created basically a hub and spoke business model. I would call our company, more than anything, a data company. And so the information that we then gather from the clients and maintain and keep those records on a forward basis as things change, and then share that with the other professionals. We created what's called the Archford Family Library. So my COO was with Accenture for 13 years. There's always an interesting story. My parents passed within 9 days of one another in 2014. And in 2016, we were having a conversation, and I said, why is it that I can go to the library, check out a book, take it back, and I could tell my CPA, my attorney, my banker, my broker, my insurance agent, my business partner, my successor trustee, my spouse about that book, and they could all go get it in a matter of seconds. But whenever we deal with these closely held business owners and families in general, there's no standardization in what the records are on that. And so we thought about it, and we're like, oh, it's the Dewey Decimal System. And then we were like, no, our aha moment was, it's not just the Dewey Decimal System, it's the librarian, the discipline of putting that tag on every book, putting it back on the shelf when it comes back, goes out. So we have a full-time librarian who puts all on. So it's an iCloud system. We have a mobile app for it where they can pull that data. But one of the biggest things with business owners is time. And how do we save them time, save them money, make them money? That's my, we're here at in our lab, we call it the innovation lab. And that's the mantra: save them time, save them money, make them money. I mean, time's the most important commodity to the people that we run with, and being able to have that data for them in an organized manner for their professionals to be able to get it and understand how that comes to them all the time. Unbelievable experience.
That is really fascinating. I mean, other than referring to the Dewey Decimal System, which I never understood, and I'm sure you don't either, really, but
we call it metadata now.
So will you? Okay, so you have your hub and spoke, and I've seen the hub and spoke. It's a great chart. You have everything from banking services to estate planning and financial and so if I'm an advisor and I'm working with somebody that works with Archford, Does he give me permission to have access to the material, or do I tell you what I need and you send it to me? Or this is really interesting to me.
The way to think about it is think of Microsoft SharePoint as a
Sure.
chassis.
Yeah, we run
And
on
so
that.
what we've done is we've come across the top of it and just customized the dickens out of it. I mean,
Huh.
as far as, because most institutional software like that is not intuitive for most people. And so we flattened out all the files and made it very clear. So here's your taxes, here's your insurance, here's your legal documents, all of those different things. So the way we thought about it originally was like going up to the old card drawer in the library, and you'd have the rows and the columns of the little files, the 3x5s, but that was legal, that was insurance, that was financial statements, that was operations. And then all of those entities that the business has, they have something in all of those areas. They're going to have their own legal documents. They're going to have their own insurance, their own financial statements, everything like that. And so it was that bringing that together for the client to be, oh my gosh. And so literally in a couple clicks, oh, you need your 2019 tax return, couple clicks, they can have it there for the banker. You need your 2020, you need your, we need a copy of your trust agreement to make sure that you can put that, we get the titling right for that property that you just bought to go into your trust. All of those things are interrelated, but normally those individuals are, well, I got to call my wife, or I got to call the bank to get that, or I got to call my CPA, to get that, or let me get a hold of my attorney. And so what we want to do is take that part of the process out and make sure that everything is current. So by running with this data, we're able to help them then make decisions and prepare for continuity. If something happens, think about it. 95% of the households you work with, husband, wife, whatever, one of them does all the records and the other one does everything else. I mean, it's just, I've been doing this 35 years. I mean, it just, 95% of the situations, that's something that's not a shared duty typically, but it creates a tremendous void for someone if they lose that person. I got a great story sample of that. Was working with, she actually was a keynote speaker for me. She had a PhD in English. Her husband had a PhD in accounting. He was national head of one of the big 6 accounting firms at that point for banking, was CEO of 3 banks. Both of them were diagnosed with cancer within the same week. She had a more aggressive cancer. He said, you go first with your treatments. So she did. Everything went well. He started doing his treatments. 14 months later, he passed. But understand, this gentleman prepared financial statements nightly before they would have dinner. So as the market closed every day, so let's just say a little bit anal.
A little, yeah.
As far as paying attention to detail. So her program's called The Morning After. And she talks about going down to the study the next day after he dies and reaching up and getting the binder with the estate planning documents and laying them open and looking at them and, with pride about how we've prepared and everything. And she goes to get on the computer and she starts typing in, and she didn't have the password and she wasn't the administrator. So we ended up, within 3 days, she was locked out of all of her bank accounts. And we ended up having to go back and recreate her Quicken files so that she could see it in the same way that her husband had prepared it for her every day. Her son was it was a second marriage. Her son was an attorney at a large law firm, and she had another son from her first marriage that was a CFA. And everyone presumed that it would just be okay with knowing how organized this second husband was on everything. But that's the reality. And so this ability to have continuity of records just resonates with me.
Wow, that's tremendous. I mean, what a convenience, what an attachment to the client. It's also, probably a pretty strong barrier to exit, but I'm sure that never occurred to you.
No. Hard to replicate.
Yeah. You walk into another professional, it's like, can you do this for me? We're going to have to go, but you're going to have to come back because I've enjoyed this immensely. I do have one last question that I finish up every one of these interviews with. Professionals are going into exit planning at a great rate. You and I were talking about this offline. What would be your one piece of advice to somebody that says, I want to go into exit planning, I want to start working with business owners on transitioning their companies?
I think the biggest thing is understanding the other disciplines. So how that team comes together. So what will the attorney contribute to the conversation? What will we need to have from that? What about the accountant with the history and what would need to be provided as far as net proceeds? How do we model it? What about the financial advisor? Will this limit some of our need that we had at one point for insurance? So all the way around that hub and spoke, each of those professional advisors, you have to understand how that exiting of that business would impact each of those areas. I'll give you one last example, and I think this is actually pretty good. I think a lot of folks approach this and think of them holding a Rubik's Cube. They become very good at putting together one side of the Rubik's Cube, and they're not paying attention on the impact to these other sides. And that's one thing that I think we do a very good job of, is looking at all of the 6 sides of that Rubik's Cube and truly trying to understand what's the implication if I'm fixing this side to these other sides, and am I communicating it? Am I a good partner with the other professionals?
Great. Well, thank you. Aside from the fact that, I don't know when you watched me work on a Rubik's Cube and know how I wind up with one side, but that's as good as I can do. But,
one last thing I'd leave you with, and all the folks, I think there's a lot of great information in this owner's study. I don't think our market is the only one that is having this type of playbook that's out there for everyone. I'm happy to share that owner study that we did at archfordcapital.com. So www.archfordcapital.com, and they can download the business owner study that we conducted.
That's terrific. Yes, I do. And as I said at the outset, the ability to increase awareness among the owners about what they need to be thinking about, what they need to be doing is by far the most critical mission we have.
Yeah.
So
I think it's the last thing I'd say is, I think it's also important that we understand as business owners the impact of these other folks not being successful in their exit. We still have all the roads, we still have all the schools, we still have the infrastructure. That tax liability is going to be passed on to us as a fellow business owner. And part of how I'm approaching this is, hey guys, we're all in this together. And there should be peer pressure into, do you have a good continuity plan in place? Because if we lose those 80 jobs in our community because you didn't plan, and all of a sudden something happens to you and that business ends up shut down in a couple of years, what a shame for all of us. Your family.
And what a spread. I mean, and you have vendors that don't have an outlet. You have customers that don't have a supplier. You have, besides the employees and the families involved.
Right.
Jim Maher from Archford Capital. Jim, it has been a real pleasure. We will do this again. Certainly, thrilling to talk to a thought leader and somebody that's doing big things in their community and really original things with your firm. Congratulations. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank-
John. Look forward to
thank-
being back.
Thank you very much.